Hey everybody, this is Justin from the Three Geeks podcast coming to you this Sunday morning. Unfortunately, we do not have a live show today due to a few of the geeks having some stuff come up. Everybody's doing well. A lot of stuff to celebrate. Hopefully, everyone's safe, happy, healthy. A lot of crazy stuff going on right now in the world, right? But hopefully, this finds you well. Um, Going to talk with Naomi McDougall Jones in the interview coming up. Had a really good time talking to her. She was a wonderful person to chat with and learn from. So hopefully you enjoy it. And again, hopefully this finds you well. Talk to you soon. See everybody. Hey everybody, it's another Three Geeks conversation with Justin and Naomi McDougall Jones. It's nice to have you, Naomi. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
It's wonderful having you. So you're an actor. What kind of got you in the profession? What was the jumping off point? Where was the interest from?
I'm one of those people who I had it in me from the time I was really small. My mom tells a story that she took me to see the Nutcracker when I was 4 years old, and I stood up and went, I want to do that. So where does that go?
It worked out. Yeah, it worked out. That's awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, we're here to talk about Bite Me. That's something you've had a major hand in, right? You've written it, directed it. Like it's kind of your baby, right? Co-directed, right? It's not co-directed on the thing.
I wrote it, and Meredith Edwards directed it. And
sure.
Yeah.
How was that? Yeah.
I mean, this project, I feel like in a way this project is like a redemption of my teenage self, because when I was 13 years old, I went to see The Princess Diaries, which you may remember.
Yeah.
And in that movie, the whole thing at the beginning is that this girl is supposed to be like the ultimate weirdo because she has curly hair and glasses, but she's still Anne Hathaway, you know?
Yeah, right.
And I was a kid who had very curly hair and buck teeth and glasses and braces, and I was actually a weird kid who did not look like Anne Hathaway. And I just remember watching that movie and being like, oh my God, if she's a weirdo, I am not even on the charts.
Right.
And then of course the movie goes on, and as soon as she like straightens her hair and gets a makeover, then the guy suddenly falls in love with her winning personality, and you're like, ugh. So I wanted to make a movie about a weird girl who gets love without having to fundamentally change who she is.
I think that's a good message. That's a great message. Yeah.
Thank you.
So where did it come from? Where did it when did it start? I see a lot of fun things about like kind of the roadshow and stuff, and we'll get to that, but I kind of want to know the antithesis of it.
So I love romantic comedies a lot, but they've taken a very sad turn in the last, since the 2000s, into like sort of dumb, whereas before they were like very smart, well-written, good movies that happened to be romantic comedies. So I really wanted to write a good romantic comedy for now. And then I was acting on the set of Boardwalk Empire and got chatting with one of the extras one day. And over the course of this like 13-hour shoot day, she revealed to me that she identifies as a vampire. And I was like, what? Come again?
Yeah, same.
And so, but I learned from this woman that there is in fact a global community of people who identify as vampires, and they don't think they're supernatural. Huh. They don't think they're going to live forever, but they believe that they need to drink blood to stay healthy. Or some of them are psychic vampires and they believe they can feed on energy. But anyway, so I became extremely fascinated by this.
Sure. Yeah, same.
And was like, how has nobody ever made a movie about this? And also just like, was just kind of inspired that these people like live this belief so with such conviction, even as it like causes many of them to get disowned from their families
Sure.
or really to the fringes of society. So that's, and I was getting audited at the time. So all of this came together into this movie that is a romantic comedy about a real life vampire who is getting audited by the IRS. And
I was going to say, the IRS sprinkled in? Okay. That's awesome. So I was reading here that you had quite the road show prior to kind of the festival thing. How was that? That was a cool paragraph to read, right? It was a nifty thing.
Yeah.
Like, how did that
go? So my producing partner, Sarah Wharton, and I had both had previous films that we'd released in sort of more traditional distribution methods through distributors and had like pretty lackluster experiences.
Sure.
You know, not only is the state of indie film distribution kind of in deep horror show despair, but because of digital, everything being so digital, often as the filmmaker, you actually have no interaction with your audience, which sucks, because like you tell a story to have it impact people, and then to get there's supposed to be like a feedback loop there.
Right.
And so we didn't want to have that experience with this movie. And because it's a movie about joy and like being seen for who you are and all this, we just really felt like there needed to be an in-person component of its release. So we rented an RV. So this was the summer before COVID.
Yeah.
When this was still possible, we rented an RV and we moved into it for 3 months, and we drove 13,001 miles in a giant circle around the United States. And we did the Joyful Vampire Tour of America, which was 51 screenings in 40 cities in 90 days, which was bananas.
Yeah.
But so fun. And it was kind of like a circus comes to town thing. Like we were in costume. We invited the audience to come in costume. After every screening, we threw a joyful vampire ball, which was like part costume party, part community building event, part let your freak flag fly. And there's actually a whole docuseries. So in the RV with myself and my husband, there was also a documentary filmmaker, Kiwi Callahan, who was making a docuseries in real time about this whole thing as we went. So that's on YouTube if anybody would like to check that out.
We definitely should. There should be more balls as well. That sounds like a fun time. That sounds like a great time. Just right afterwards having like a party.
Yeah, it was the most fun thing I've ever done. It was, again, completely insane, but very, very fun.
Did you meet more vampires along the way, like the ones
we
that
did?
Yeah.
So we met many, but the highlight for me was that the king and queen of the Austin vampires came to our screening in Austin, Texas, and loved the movie and came out for drinks with us afterwards.
Vampire approved. It's good.
I mean, well, which was a high bar because I'm not part of this community myself. It's always a risky business making a film about a community you're not part of, and I really cared that I got it right, and because they think they were worried initially that we'd be making fun of them or something.
Yeah, that's a fair worry. Yeah,
but we aren't, and they loved it, and that felt really good.
Yeah, that's great. I wonder how many more communities are out there like that I'm just so totally ignorant of. You know what I mean? There's
infinite.
Probably a lot. Yeah.
Infinite. I think the internet has changed everything, right? Because before you might have been like, I think I might be a vampire, but you wouldn't know anybody else.
Right.
But then the internet came around and like, whatever niche, whatever you're into, there's like at least 10 other people you can find on the internet.
Is that the minimum? Is 10 people? Like we have to have 10. I mean, like, 8, we're just weird.
Is it a community if it's less than 10 people?
That's a good point. You make a very valid point.
And vampires are not 10 people. There's like by
a lot. I'm assuming a lot.
Thousands to hundreds of thousands of people worldwide.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's a cool community.
Yeah.
Okay. How do they congregate? I'm so interested in this whole thing. Like, how do they like? Is it just all web based? Is it all like forums and stuff?
No, it's not all web based. So, what we portray in the film is very accurate in terms of there are houses, and it's like a bit like a court system. Like you can be an independent vampire,
Okay.
You don't have to belong to a house, but most vampires do belong to a house that's like physically located in your city. And there's like, there's a king and queen, there's like various levels of sort of hierarchy. And they throw these vampire balls, which is hence our joyful
Yeah,
vampire,
no, it makes sense.
a little bit
Yeah.
different. But
Yeah.
but there's a big scene in the movie that is a vampire ball that are very fun. And yeah, it's a whole thing.
That's incredible. I
Yeah.
can't wait to watch it just to learn more about it. And I can't get over, my mind is like wrapped around how many communities are. Is there werewolves now? Like, are there other, like, you know what I mean? Like, are there?
Well, okay, here's a great story. So
Okay.
we were scouting locations for the film in New York, and my producer found this bar on the Upper East Side that was like perfect for this bar scene, because it was supposed to be a bar where vampires would go. And this bar was like red velvet on the walls, like the whole thing. And she was like, oh my God, this is perfect. And she sat down at the bar and got a drink and was chatting with the bartender. And he was like, so what are you doing here? She's like, I'm scouting this movie about vampires. And he's like, oh, that's amazing. I'm a werewolf. And
how about that?
Yeah.
Is it a werewolf bar, or is it just he was a werewolf?
He was a werewolf. But I bet a lot of werewolves and vampires hang out there.
I hope so. I hope it's a strong, like, bonding moment. That'd be good.
Yeah. But, you know, one of the core themes of the movie is like seeing past our differences to our common humanity, and how like we're in this time of very intensive labeling of everything, and like every identity has like an intersection of so many labels. And I think that's a really important thing in sort of the arc of a necessary step in the sort of arc of social justice. And I think these identities, when we so tightly label them, it often separate us also. And so like each character in the film is both judged by other people for the identity they have and sort of trapped by it. So the IRS agent is seen as this very square white guy, boring white guy, because he's an IRS agent. Because that's
that seems fitting.
Yeah. But is actually much stranger than is sort of trapped himself by the fact that he's much stranger than other people see him, or that he allows himself to be seen. And conversely, he's the main love interest in my character, has blue hair and a facial tattoo and wears leather and is a vampire. And sort of her whole identity is built around this thing, but is actually coming to suspect in her late 20s that she might actually be more normal. She might actually be more normal than she has built herself to be.
Sure.
So
that's a wonderful message too. Is the underpinning is we're all the same, not very, very similar, right? 99% of us are the same. You know what I mean? But
and that at the end of the day, we all want to be seen and loved for who we are.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. So you said something right there that I was thinking about, is that face tattoo. Is that something you had to put on like daily? Like, did you? How was that?
So not only did I have to put it on daily, we actually had to have a specific person on set whose entire job was this tattoo.
Yeah.
Janae Chin, and she designed it as well. She did an amazing job. But so it was basically like any temp tattoo that you would think of. You know, I mean, it was higher quality than that. But like when you were a kid, you would put it face down, put a washcloth on the back, and then you'd after a while lift it up. But if you remember doing that, it's a fairly inexact science.
Yeah.
That process, but of course the tattoo is right there. So if it moved like a half an inch from day to day, the continuity of the film would be blown. And so Janae every morning had to put this tattoo on me, like, hold up pictures. She had like measurements of where exactly it was, and like some mornings would have to put it on two or three times. It was like exactly right. But I love it.
Yeah, that's sweet. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So another thing you've done, and I was reading about it, The Wrong Kind of Woman, inside our revolution to dismantle the gods of Hollywood. You're an author. How was that? I was writing a book.
It's a lot of words to write.
I bet. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my whole career has been kind of like that magician's trick where like they tell you to pull a handkerchief out of a hat and you do, and it's attached to another handkerchief that's attached to another handkerchief.
Yeah.
So I got into this business to be an actress, which I had wanted to do since I was 4, and then was doing that and became very disillusioned by the roles available for women, which are, as you may have heard, horrible. So then I was like, okay, well then I'll become a filmmaker and I'll write better roles for women. And so then I did that. And then in the process of that, became aware of the real depth of sexism within Hollywood and the sort of like literal systematic exclusion of women's voices from cinema. And became really indignant about that. And so then became I accidentally fell into being a speaker on this topic because when my first film, Imagine I'm Beautiful, came out, I would just talk about what we'd experienced at Q&A as women at Q&As after the film. And people had this sort of electric response because they couldn't believe that what I was saying was actually happening. So then I got put on the global speaking circuit talking about the lack of women in film and why it matters and how it affects all of society and all these things. And then I got offered a TED Talk, the opportunity to do a TED Talk about this, which I did, which then went viral, which then I got offered the opportunity to write a book about it. So then I had to figure out how to write a book, but that was amazing. And I got to spend a year interviewing 100 women and men up and down the industry, really unpacking, how this happens, because it's crazy that women are 51% of the population and direct like 5 to 10% of all the studio films. And then I did, thousands of pages of research of data and looking at, the numbers that underpin those experiences and then weaving in my own experience. So I'm really, really proud of the book. And the feedback I've received is that it's one of the few places where the whole women in film thing is laid out in one place.
Sure. So you interviewed 100 different people. Do you have did all those experiences make it into your book? Do you have some that just didn't make it that you wanted to? Like, you know what I mean? Like stuff gets edited out, or does that not? Yeah.
There were a small handful of interviews where just none of the content made it into the book, just because for space or because they were sort of saying things that other people had said. But most of the interviews are in there. One thing that's interesting is the only way I could get people to talk to me for this book is by promising them that they could go anonymous if they wanted to before the book was published, because it's still to this day so dangerous to speak about these things out loud. Just not like doing it, just like saying the things that are true out loud.
Right.
That people were too terrified to talk to me unless I gave them that out. So what did happen a lot was that I would do the interviews, I would send people their quotes in the book, and I would say about half of them opted to take their names out. So they would leave the quote in, but take their names out.
I didn't even process that until you brought it up, but that made total sense, right? You're impacting your career, your livelihood potentially, right? So yeah, that makes sense. That's scary. That stinks that you can't just be open about stuff.
It's crazy. It's like the mafia.
Yeah. I mean, the mafia ran Hollywood for a long time, didn't they?
I know. I guess the DNA is still there.
Yeah.
But like, to think that you can't just be like, these are the things I've experienced as a woman in Hollywood, that's dangerous. You can be blackballed for that is crazy.
That's what. So I think I know the name where it came from, but the 51 Fund. What's that about?
Yeah. So here's another important thing.
Yeah, let's get right back into it. Yeah.
So as I was traveling the world speaking about these women in film issues and again, why they matter, I gave this one talk where afterwards Lois Scott, who's the former CFO of the city of Chicago, which I didn't know was a job until I met this person. So she just happened to be in the audience at one of these talks, and she came up to me and she said, this is awful. Like I've spent my whole career in finance. I never cared about movies, never thought about them, but like, you've convinced me that this is actually the most important lever to change the world. What do we do about it? And I was like, well, basically we need a fund to finance films by female filmmakers. And she was like, okay, well then if I take that on, will you do it with me? And I was like, okay, thinking I'd probably never hear from her again.
Right,
but I did. And we ended up bringing on 2 other founders and now a 5th team member. And so we now have the private equity fund to finance films by female directors. And we our film Cusp, which is a documentary, premiered at Sundance last year, won a special jury prize, got bought by Showtime, is now having an Oscars campaign.
Sweet.
And that's very exciting. And we have a bunch of new films we're about to announce.
How exciting is that? That's cool. That's great.
It's super cool. And who knew I would get involved in private equity? I have an associate's degree in acting.
I mean, it all works out. Well, you've obviously found something very, very important to speak on, and you have life experiences, and you learn from other people's life experiences to talk about it. That's great. Yeah. So tangent, right? I would be remiss not to bring it up. What's like working for Martin Scorsese, right? Like, what's that? Like, what? I've never met someone who's done that before.
Well, he was not super involved on set.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. So I think it would be a stretch to say that I worked for him.
Well,
but getting to be, but getting to be on Boardwalk Empire was so exciting. And
I bet. Yeah.
You know, when I was on it, it was like the show of the cultural moment. It was the thing that everyone was talking about, everyone was watching. And to get to be on a show of that size too, and the machinery that goes into making a show where it's just, I mean, it literally feels like being inside of of this like amazing machine, where you're just sort of this one piece, and like the PA comes and gets you, and you move and moves you over here, and then like you're on set, and then they send you back over here, and then but it was thrilling and very fun to be in the costumes and the whole thing.
Oh, I bet it'd be cool to be back in that time frame. Just the costumes alone be nifty.
Yeah, and the hairdos were fun.
Yeah, good point. Where can folks where can folks watch Bite Me? I know it's not out yet, I don't believe, but when it's out?
8th, but you can pre-order it today, and actually that would be very helpful to us. So basically all of life is battling internet algorithms to reach other human beings, as you probably experience. So the placement of an independent film when it comes out on the Apple and the other platforms like makes or breaks a film. So in order to get good placement, you need a lot of pre-orders. So we need to get 400 pre-orders by February 8th, and we're at 275 as of February 1st.
So buy up.
So pre-order the movie on iTunes or Apple TV would super helpful. But if not, it will be available also on those platforms and on Amazon and Google Play starting February 8th.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else you want to promote? Anything else coming up in your life, Naomi, that you want to talk to folks about?
Well, I got to act in a film this year called Suffer, which is a Western fantasy survival film where I got to play, I'm like one of the only characters in the movie. It's like a bit like The Revenant. It's like The Revenant meets Game of Thrones meets a Western movie.
Sign me up.
So it's pretty fun, and I have a sword and magical powers. It's very fun. Directed by Carrie Carlock and Nick Lund Ulrich, and it'll be coming out this year, so you can look out for that too.
That's exciting. Was there a snake in your boot? Every time I think of a Western, I think of...
I had a stake in my body. The film begins with a stagecoach crash, and I start the film with in manacles because I'm a prisoner at the beginning of the film, and I have a giant wooden stake in my side that I then have to pull out in a very dramatic and gory fashion. So tune in for that.
You sold me. Yeah. It was wonderful talking to you, Naomi. Where can folks find you online if you have any like Twitter or anything that you want people to get to?
I'm on all the platforms, and also my website, NaomiMcDougallJones.com. I have a newsletter there. I send out updates and special offers and stuff, so you can find me there too.
Awesome. Well, it was wonderful having you, Naomi.
Thanks so much for having me.